Hi guys and welcome back. So I just finished my rereading of Mockingjay, the third book in the Hunger Games trilogy, and therefore finished my project of rereading the original trilogy. So I want to talk about Mockingjay in this video and why I always felt that it was by far the weakest book in the trilogy. So let's get straight into it. So basically I wrote down a lot of notes during my rereading and I'm going to go through all of them, but I always had two main issues with Mockingjay. So issue number one was that everything just felt super slow. Like until we finally get into the fighting, until we finally get into the capital, there's so much reflection, there's so many dreams, visions, there's so much Hollywood propaganda that is being done here until we finally get into the action. Whereas, the first book, The Hunger Games and Catching Fire, was much more active, was much more exciting, a lot was happening in there. And this book here felt just like a lot of waiting, a lot of reflecting, a lot of politics, which I do enjoy to some extent, but it was just all way too much for me. And then the second main issue I have with this book is that it's just the way that she is, and by she I mean Suzanne Collins, is treating Peeta in this book is absolutely painful. Like, he is beyond useless in this book, and he is just such a pain to read. That he turns from being this smart, charismatic, strong personality from the first book now into the third book. He is just not even a shadow of himself. He is this ghost, and I know that was the intention, but for me, being a big fan of Peeta, I absolutely hated what was done to that character, and that he is basically just a pain in the ass of everybody in this book here, and just causes troubles for everybody. And I really had always a hard time reading and rereading Mockingjay because of like those two facts. I still, I still love the trilogy, I still love the series, but I really do feel that Mockingjay did do a very great disservice to the trilogy, and it didn't feel as strong as the other two books, not even nearly as strong as the other two books, and it was just not at the same level as The Hunger Games and Catching Fire was. And I kind of got the feeling that maybe just Suzanne Collins, she found herself in a situation where the first book, the second book, they blew up so much in popularity, and then there was so much pressure on her to kind of finish this story and finish it in a worthwhile way, and in a way that is I guess deserved by what has become such a huge success. And maybe she kind of crumbled under that pressure that she was in, but I don't think that what we are seeing here with Mockingjay is even close to her best work or the best that she could have done with this book. I'm not actually sure how like the general consensus is on Mockingjay. Two people usually like it as opposed to the others in the series. So please let me know in the comments below, where does Mockingjay rank for you? And I may do, for the next video, I may actually do a ranking of all the Hunger Games books, including the prequels. So watch out for that one. But first, let's go a little bit more into the details and the kind of notes that I took during the rereading of Mockingjay. So, as I mentioned, I really disliked this whole Hollywood propaganda thing that they had going on with, just filming her in a studio and then filming her outside. Well, not much was happening except for the attack on the hospital that we saw in District 8. But other than that, it was just about, basically getting her prepared for filming, waiting until the next kind of advertisement is being taped, and it's just this whole plot around that kind of propaganda felt very flat for me, felt very boring to me, so I did not enjoy that part at all. One thing that also felt super weird to me is like, it kind of felt to me like Collins was trying to turn this into like a Marvel's adventure story with, or a James Bond story with BT basically being Q, and then they all have these gadgets now, these bows that can do anything, and then Finnick would have a trident that on bottom press he can return to him, and it just all felt very much Marvel-esque and superhero style in this book, and I just couldn't take it as serious anymore because I felt like a little bit pushed out of the fantasy and taken out of that kind of world that I was so immersed in, because it didn't feel like those things would fit together anymore to me. What I did find more believable is like how relationships are approached in this book. So, for example, we see a clear, slow deterioration of Katniss and Gale relationship, and it's a succession of events happening that draws them apart. And Katniss realizing that, oh well, Gale probably doesn't really have the same set of values and value system that she has, and that there's more and more the kind of feeling from both sides that they don't really match up that well with each other. And that already begins in the very beginning when Katniss sees the interview of Peeta, and then kind of Gale's reaction to that, and then with Gale not even mentioning that about Peter's interview, which is when Katniss kind of starts realizing that she may not be able to trust Gale 100% on anything, as she used to think, and for her, trust is a very important value. So that's after that, it just slowly goes down and down and down with their relationship. What I find a little bit weird is talking about relationships is when Peter gets back to District 13 when he finally gets rescued, and then they have some conversation. He starts talking with Deli Cartwright, and they never really talk about his family. It's just like mentioned, oh well, his parents and his brothers, I think, or sisters, they all just died, and it's just like there's no him dealing with that pain. There's no him caring about any of that. I know that by that point he is still very much hijacked by the venom, but those kind of memories to his family would not be, I would assume, would not be the hijacked ones, as those memories were the ones that had something to do with Katniss. And I find it a little bit weird that we don't see him try to work through that pain of losing his family, while we get to see every unnecessary, unimportant thing in very, very detail during that time. From Katniss and Johanna training, and even Prim's cat is getting more recognition than Peter's family dying off screen, basically. So I find that ridiculous, to be honest. So what we also see with Gale is that he is, and I dislike him more and more, but we can see him clearly now becoming more and more manipulative in this book, and just kind of trying to push the plot in a way that fits him, and only very much only focusing on himself and only caring about himself, going as far as to say, oh, I'm jealous of Peeta being in such a horrible state, because this way I cannot compete with him at all. And he's just only thinking about himself, manipulating the situation in a way that suits him. And I really just absolutely hate Gale in this one. I already disliked him in the previous book, so I really don't understand why there's any Gale fans out there. But for me, he's just always been kind of a horrible person, to be honest. So what I wonder a little bit about Peeta in the beginning is, and I'm sorry to keep jumping back and forth between topics here, but that's just how my brain works. I'm sorry. But I wonder how did he find out that District 13 was going to be attacked and was going to be bombed? Because, I mean, for sure they would have kept him separated from anybody else. We know that he was locked up in a cell most of the time. So how would he have heard about that? I kind of failed to understand that point. And then what I also failed to understand with the bombing is, how is it that they're just bombing District 13 a few times and then just never again? Like, they just all come back up to the surface, and then life is okay again in District District 13, and they're never ever bombed again by the capital. Which I know after District 2 is being taken, basically, the capital has a reduced arsenal of weapons, basically, and of airships. But still, you would assume that between the first attacks and that point, there would have been some more bombings on District 13. So what happened there? Did they just stop attacking them, or what was going on there? Coming back to Peeta, one of the only things that I did enjoy in this book about Katniss and Peeta relationship was this real not real game, because I don't know, it felt so vulnerable from both sides, and even playing this real not real game requires a lot of trust, especially in the beginning when they started, because like if the other person says real, then they just have to trust that it was real. So even starting with this game and with playing the real not real game, that already meant that a large part of the trust that was between them originally came back already at that point. Some things that felt a little bit off as well was with like the timeline. So for example, after the bombing of District 13, Katniss was like saying that the capital now had Peeta for like 4 or 5 weeks already. Which like I was reading this, I was like thinking, what do you mean 4 or 5 weeks? Like you made it sound like it was half a year already. Like especially how draggy and slow the book was going. I thought that he was there for at least half a year, but apparently it was only a few weeks, which I fail to understand how all these actions could happen in just 4 or 5 weeks. But I guess that's what it is. One of the characters that I do enjoy a lot, and her growth in this book, is Prim. So Prim, she feels very smart. She understands connections very quickly. She is very able to face reality, even if that kind of reality is a painful one. So she feels very mature, and I just hate that she had to die in the end. Like, couldn't they, take anybody else, anybody, for example, Gale? But yeah, I really enjoyed how Prim developed over these 3 books, basically. I just wrote down here again, I'm so bored with all the interviews and propaganda filmmaking. So I really noted down this remark a few times, because it was just getting so intolerable to go on with all these interviews with visions, with dreams, with the filmmaking, and me here wanting to read about the dystopian young adult novel, basically, that has some action in it. So I don't know, it felt like almost a completely different genre to what the other books are. What is very sad again is that some of the connections that are now made with the prequels, and that I'm only understanding now. So for example, when Katniss is wondering about, well, what happened to Haymitch's family, and then her hearing that, well, basically 2 weeks after he's won the tournament, basically all of his family, including his girl that he loved, was dead. And now knowing the full extent of that backstory and of that pain, and how he through that developed into kind of personality that he is in the original series, with developing alcohol addiction and this, just sad, angry personality, it's just very heart-wrenching to read about this here, just as a side note, now knowing the full extent of that backstory. So especially after reading Ballad, I noticed there's quite a few people that are like kind of fans of Coriolanus Snow, and I fail to understand how this is even a thing, that people could like Snow, President Snow, even to a small extent, because like if you still don't hate him, remember that he used to actually pimp out the victors, like Finnick and Annie and all of these victors. And that's not even in the top 10 of most horrible things that Coriolanus Snow has done. Especially if you consider part of the ending of this book, where Snow actually goes so far as to use children of the capital as human shield to protect himself. So this guy is just a horrible guy through and through, and no matter what anybody says, that's my opinion on it. one thing that I also thought was very lazy writing on Colin's end was when we had one of those super boring scenes in the beginning of the book when Finnick is talking about the secrets that he knows about people from the capital to buy the team that is trying to rescue Peeta sometime. And then it's just basically this generic telling of secrets of residents from the capital with, the usual thing of people cheating, people having, gambling debts, maybe some murderer, stuff like that. But it's kept very generic. We don't hear about a single actual example of a secret of a person that he's telling. With the only example given is about President Snow himself and about how he poisons people, basically. But other than that, we don't really hear any of these secrets. And I mean, surely Collins could at least have thought of 3-4 examples to tell us in this whole retelling of Finnick's secrets that he used to deal in and that he took as payment for his services. But I guess lazy generic storytelling is just what we are getting here in this third book. What I do still very much like about Katniss' character and personality in this book, she is still keeping very true to her values. She is still, whenever possible, trying to be empathetic about other people, while still being very selfish. But she hasn't changed that much in personality, so she is still trying to keep true to herself and just trying to take the capital down, basically. So I think one of the relationships I enjoyed most in this book was actually the short relationship where Katniss and Johanna get a little bit closer, where they're still kind of hating on each other, but they take care of each other, they help each other training, and they are there for each other. So I do quite enjoy that kind of relationship, hate-love relationship between Katniss and Johanna. Then just quickly touching on Coin, President Coin versus President Snow. I know that some people, especially after the ending, argue that Coin is worse than Snow, but we really don't have any proof for that. We know that she did a few horrible things already with with the bombs being airdropped, stuff like that on the children. But just looking at the whole events of things and the whole facts of things, we know that Snow had a history of 65 years basically of just absolute horrible and terrible behavior, just being murderous and not caring about human life and just treating everybody like rubbish. And from Coin, while we do see that she wants to have power for herself and that she wants to punish in the end the capital's people and children as well, she would like to do that. We really don't have enough evidence to say that she would have been as bad as Snow was. So for me, yes, she is a bad person as well, and I do understand why Katniss shot her, and I'm very much okay with that, because at that point Snow didn't have any power anymore anyway. But I still feel that if you're talking about who was worse, then Snow is up here, while Coin would still have a lot of ways to go to reach to the same level of horribleness as Snow is at. One thing, when they are at the capital in the end and they are slowly separating from each other, I found it out of character that Katniss would leave Peeta go by himself, and especially by himself not really being there in his mind and not being able to take care of himself, that she would accept that he is just kind of a distraction and would be killed in that moment. So I found it very out of character that she, who has always been trying to protect him, would just let him go by himself just because he's a little bit of an annoyance to take with her. Also, now having read Ballad, the prequel, it's interesting now to read that kind of part with Tigress again, and it must have been very painful and cost her a lot of strength go against Coriolanus, her brother, which, or is it cousin? But she has basically always been there for him while he was growing up, while they were growing up. She has always put him first place, and she's loved him very much. And then, you know, just slowly finding out what a horrible person he is, and in the end, actually helping people that want to take him out. So that probably has been a very difficult decision for her. Then I don't have much more to say about Prim than Prim's death is beyond painful, and it hurts me every time I reread the book. It's just it didn't need to be. Why couldn't he have been some of the other characters? Now, while I'm not a big fan of this book as a whole, to finish off the series, I do quite like the last part of it with, you know, Coin trying to put on new Hunger Games, them going against it, and then kind of Katniss just being banished off to the destroyed District 12 again, and then, you know, slowly starting to build a life again, slowly getting closer to Peeta again. And I actually thought that, especially the epilogue, not even like the last chapter, but actually the epilogue where we see Katniss and Peeta back in District 12, and also like that last sentence that there are much worse games to play. I really very much enjoy the epilogue. I think the epilogue is probably the strongest chapter of the whole book here. And I'm glad that it at least ended on such a strong chapter. Maybe she's written that a long time before the rest of the book because she knew how she wanted it to end. But it felt much stronger than anything else that she wrote in that book. Yeah, but that's basically my opinion of Mockingjay after rereading it after many years. But let me know in the comments below what you like about Mockingjay, what you dislike about it, any points that I made that you agree or disagree with. Yeah, please let me know in the comments below. And otherwise, thank you. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.